So we're going to be taking a look at a couple of different concepts that relate to one another. So the PowerPoint is going to be covering assessment, standards, and standardized tests. And we're going to define each of those separately so they become clear in our mind. We use these terms interchangeably in the world of academia and education, but we need to understand that there are different contexts that the different vocabulary is most appropriate. Okay. So when we take a look at assessment, there's many different ways that we define the term assessment. And we're going to take a look at some of these different definitions. So a variety of methods used to determine what students know and are able to do before, during, and after instruction. Another definition refers to almost any form of measurement and appraisal of what children can do, including tests, observation, interviews, reports from knowledgeable sources, and other means. Another definition, process of gathering information about children from several forms of evidence, then organizing and interpreting that information. Or how to gather and document the information teachers need to identify the strengths, needs, and progress of children in their classroom so they can help those children learn. So there's no standardized definition that we seem to agree on in our field. But looking at just these 4 different definitions, and this is from 4 different textbooks, okay, on assessment. Looking at these 4 different definitions, can you start to pull out common themes and elements from each of these? They might be using different vocabulary words, but the definitions are all basically saying the same things. What is all of these definitions saying? What are some of the common threads we see weaving themselves through? So gathering information, what else do we see? How are we gathering information? Is it just through anecdotal observations, or what else do you see? So many different ways.
Evidence.
So we're gathering information, evidences, again, different terminology for the same thing, in many different ways, and using it to gather information to help kids, right, to help the children in our program. So if we want to simplify all these very technical and academic sounding definitions, it's basically what assessment is. We're using multiple forms of observation, multiple forms, multiple ways to gather information to help support children. That's all that assessment is. Okay, so we take these fancy definitions and we boil it down to that. Is that clear? Good? All right. Wouldn't it be good if that was all it is? So what do we see? The principles. Using multiple sources of information. We talked about that. Benefit the child and improve learning. That is one that's heavily debated on whether or not the assessment tools we are currently using, both in early childhood and in the K-12 system, do they benefit children? What's the purpose of them? Are they beneficial to children? Involve the children and the family. Do the assessment tools that we use involve the children and the family in any way? Why would we want to involve family? Tailored to a specific purpose and should be reliable, valid, and fair. Why would we want it to be tailored to a specific purpose? This applies directly to what we looked at for rating scales and frequency counts and checklists. Why do we want it to be designed for a specific purpose? To monitor their behavior, go a little bit deeper. Do we just want to get all information using one tool?
No.
No. That would be very cumbersome. If I wanted to assess all developmental domains using one tool, how big would our tool be? Impossible. Okay? So our assessment tools should be tailored to a specific purpose. What is the purpose of this tool? What is the purpose of your tool? It needs to be specific. And we're going to talk about how this applies to reliable and valid in just a second. Age appropriate in both content and method of data collection. So what you're assessing them on, as well as how you're assessing them, should be age appropriate. Would a multiple choice fill-in be appropriate for a 3-year-old? No, that should be logical. It's not logical to some people in government, but it's logical to people that know these things. Linguistically appropriate, recognizing that to some extent all assessments are measures of language. Especially as we go up, how are we assessing children's knowledge usually? Even a math test, we assess it through language, right? If a child has a learning disorder that's focused on reading, are they still going to struggle with a math problem? Yes. So especially as we move up, going into the K through 12 system, most assessment that children do have a language basics. So especially if we have second language learners, is it a true assessment of their abilities? No, and we're going to talk about that extensively when we look at standardized tests. Parents should be a valued source of assessment information as well as an audience for assessment results. And do children demonstrate different behaviors at home sometimes than they do at school?
Yeah.
Yes, especially depending on their temperament. Some children will sit very quietly and do almost nothing all day because of their temperament, but at home, it's like unleashing the beast, and they're completely different children. So we get different information. So when we're assessing children, should some of our information come from parent feedback? Yes, and when we took a look at checklists, what were some of the identifiers that allowed us to give us that information? Remember we had that 3D? What did that mean? Seen from a third party, remember? Yes, go ahead.